Y'all, wow, I loved this movie. Today we're reviewing Top Gun Maverick, and I saw it last night when I'm filming this, and I cannot stop thinking about it and how good it was and how much I loved it and how much this movie is just the kind of movie that you go to the movies for. Like, this movie is why people make movies. It's just... there's so much to talk about. There is something so intangible about this movie that made me love it so much. There's a lot of parts of this film that I could kind of dissect, or you could say like, oh, this cinematography was really amazing. They used film cameras here. They had a really nice color grading on the film. There was some really great editing and sound choices. The soundtrack really is bomb in this movie though. Like, absolutely stellar. But there's a lot of those independent aspects of the film that I usually tend to talk about. This film is so much better than the sum of its parts. Like, it genuinely is. It's not that there isn't really great work being done in all of those little elements. It's just that the film itself, it is so much better than saying, yes, the script was good, and then this scene was really touching, and then I really liked the acting in this part of the film. Like, it's just so much better than that, and it is really, to me, one of the first films I've seen in a while that feels just like holistically the mission was known of what was being going on with this film, and just every aspect and part of the movie, every role on set knew what they were doing. It genuinely is so much better than its parts. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about like, oh, this element was that great, because I genuinely think it all works so well in tandem together to create the film that you see, to where sometimes you can't even pick apart those pieces because they work so well together. It has been a long time since I felt the tension that I felt in this film. Like, you know when you're watching something and you physically feel like your muscles tensing up, you're sitting up kind of like crouched or together, like kind of holding yourself tight. You feel like you could throw up or cheer, and your heart's kind of racing or it's stopping. Like, this film had that, and it was, I mean, you expect it probably from a Top Gun film, honestly, because it's so intense, but this one did it so well. I couldn't have been happier with feeling that way in a film. I'm trying to think, like, Scream, yeah, has its jump scares. I was excited and exhilarated to see Doctor Strange, but like the last time I maybe felt this in a movie was when I watched King Richard, seeing the girls play tennis and not knowing exactly how it's gonna play out. Like, and part of that has to do so much with the way that they filmed it. The filming that they did in these fighter jets of the characters and the types of cameras that they used, like, I cannot wait to do a deep dive into all that behind the scenes and exploration of how this film was made, because genuinely it was so immersive. And usually I am not the kind of person that's like, IMAX really matters, or like seeing it in a certain format is that important, because for me, I kind of get thrown off by the aspect ratio change of IMAX. Like, there's a lot of films where it will just be a shot. I think of Tenet, when you see the plane and like that whole shot is IMAX, but then anytime it's just back to the characters, it's just, you know, regular 16:9 aspect ratio. But holy cow, this film must have cost them a fortune. But the entire sequences of the film, which if you break a script up, you can get into acts, and then each act is kind of broken up by a number of like 15-minute sequences, if you want to think about it as like a chapter of the film. And these entire sequences, whether they were in planes, on the ground, characters were talking, these entire sequences would be filmed in IMAX. And it was so good that you didn't even notice how when it switched back. I mean, okay, you did if you really were paying attention. But it was so immersive and really threw you into the story. The entire opening sequence of the film is in IMAX, and I think that's, usually you don't see IMAX until like kind of more impressive middle to climax third act of the film, but here you see it right off the bat, and I just think it was spectacular choice. So I urge you, if you're gonna go see this movie, please go see it in an IMAX theater, because I really think that does this film so much justice, and I genuinely don't feel that way about a lot of movies. So I'm only putting this out there that if you have the opportunity to go see it in IMAX, I really would urge you to do so. For a little bit of context, I grew up in an aviation family, people who are around airplanes, who work with them, who fly airplanes. And so while I myself don't, other than being a passenger, I am aware of a lot of the lingo and the jargon, or like what certain elements might be at play here. This film did some really, really great bookending with some explanation of kind of different factors that are at play when you're flying a fighter jet that I think were really clever. And without spoiling it, there's a scene very early in the film that deals with Mach levels. And what is so genius is in that scene, you come to understand what is so dangerous about a number that high or a reading that high, and sort of see how that pushes the plane and the pilot of the plane in certain ways, emotionally, physically, when you're doing a Mach 9 or a Mach 10. And then at the end of the film, you're dealing with G-force, which I think some people understand maybe better than a Mach, but it's also in a 9 or 10, which I think those should be semi-accurate numbers. I'm not saying that this film is necessarily realistic, I'm just saying that it's not like they've made these 9 and 10 to perfectly match up. That's not like a choice on the story editor's side. It's like actually what would physically push you as a human being. Anyway, I'm not explaining this well. What I think is so amazing is at the end of the film, when people are starting to hit 9 or 10 G levels, which is just insane, you understand how intense that is because of the beginning of the film, which is just such clean, good writing, because I just thought that was just a really clever book ending of the film, of how to understand how intense what these characters are going through actually is. And that's then really mirrored with the emotional side of things and the emotional stakes of the film, as well as the mission that they're undergoing. And I don't know, that was just all really clever. If you think I'm just sort of pulling that out of my butt, you can just ignore me, but I genuinely just feel like that was such a great, clever way to teach somebody who doesn't know anything really about aviation or fighter jets or anything, just how to show them that intensity established early in the film and then call it back later. This is truly a summer blockbuster, and I'm so glad that we did have to wait as long as we did to see this movie, because one, it's well worth it, but there was a brief period of time where this movie was potentially going to come out around Christmas, and it is in all ways a summer movie. It is just truly like, I am so excited for it to be May and summer right now because of this movie. Like, I'm like, let's go to the beach, let's hit the pool, like, let's go tan, let's go work out. Like, I'm all in that zone because of this film, and that just would not have worked at Christmas time. And so I'm really glad that they did that. And I think this film does a really great job of creating a really compelling story that's independent from the original, but calling back a lot from the first film. Not only narrative pieces of information that are really well developed here, there are like spiritual roles of a Mav or a Goose or a Iceman from the first film that are then like implemented here in a way that is just so smart. And it's almost like, if you've seen the first film, you'll catch the reference, but if not, it's not like, oh, this is so obviously a reference to the first film. It's just sort of this like feeling you get that like, oh, that feels like that moment from the first film. And I love that, because it's just the effort that has to be put into that, even though it seems effortless in the film, the effort that you have to put into writing that scene, acting it out, making sure it's not too obvious of a callback while still giving it, enough to feel important. Top notch, so good. In so many ways, this film and Top Gun in general is not nuanced, but those moments really were, and I loved that. My only oof of this movie, it's not bad, but it's I don't know if I like that, is that there's a central mission, not gonna spoil what that is, where something needs to be bombed. You're not really told the location of that. You're not really told who's behind it. So it's not like there's a nation that this is tied to, or an evil bad guy, or an antagonist, which is honestly really smart, because a lot of the antagonism in this film is kind of an internal thing, or an antagonistic forces, as opposed to a singular villain or antagonist. And so my only issue is that it just feels a little vague, why this is so important, other than the fact that everyone is taking this really seriously, and you're told by the people who hand this mission down that this is extremely important. That's my only little gripe, and I think it's smart because it won't age it well. It won't tie us to a certain conflict, especially this being a military film. It also doesn't call out another nation necessarily. There's some inferences that you might be able to make, but I don't think it's necessarily 100% declared by the film at all. I just think that they make up for it a lot with the emotional turmoil that each of the characters is going through and why this mission is important to them. So it doesn't matter as much that you need to be behind the military mission, you're behind the characters. I don't mind it because the characters prove why it's important to them, and so you don't need to be behind the military side of it for this film to work. So ultimately, that's why it's just a little oof. I think it's just it definitely doesn't go the Rocky IV route and be this is the bad guy and he's from Russia and we're gonna take him down because this is symbolic of the Cold War. It doesn't do that. And in a lot of ways I do appreciate that, because I think it would age the film a little bit more. I don't know. I really want to emphasize that the reason that that's not a oof is because of the emotional weight of the characters, okay? That's really it. Also, because it has to be said, Miles Teller looks so good in this movie. I don't want to go into details. Miles Teller he understood the assignment in this film to look as good as he did. Should be potentially illegal. So good. Ladies, there's a scene that just happens on a beach, and you know, if you're an unwilling participant in going to see this movie, you're kind of dragged along by somebody, that scene you'll appreciate. So it's worth seeing even just for that, but the movie itself is really great. All like silliness or girliness aside, this film has something so enigmatic, I think that's a correct word to use here, but something so intangible, like I said, that feels both nostalgic for the 80s and the original film while still being completely original, fresh, and new. And I can't express to you how much I loved this movie. I did not go in necessarily expecting it to love it. I think, to be honest with you, I guess I'll admit this now, I don't even know if I've seen the first Top Gun all the way through. I've definitely seen the beginning and I've definitely seen like most of the ending, but there's a middle part that I don't know that I've really ever sat down and watched the entire film through to see. And I still love this movie. I understood everything about this film. I just think it is such a great movie. For me, it's the best movie of the year thus far. I really loved it that much, and I really hope that you do too, should you choose to go see it. But please let me know in the comments down below what your hype level is for Top Gun Maverick, if you are a big fan of the first one, and kind of like what your expectations going in are. Thank you all so much for watching. I would really appreciate if you hit the like button and the subscribe button, because that really supports the channel, but also helps me to know that we have a little community here, and I'll keep making videos for you guys as we go along and grow this community further. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Have an absolutely amazing day or night whenever I sounded so southern there. Have an absolutely amazing day or night whenever you're getting to watch this video, and I will see you all in my very next video. Bye, y'all.